inspiration for the show came from this cassette tape. And as you can see here, it's called Phaze 5, and it's called Steel Pan Mania. And it's basically a tape that I bought at a thrift store in Newfoundland, where I live. I live in Corner Brook, Newfoundland. Most of the works in the show are named after titles of the songs on this tape. It's a homemade tape. So I guess, I'm kind of really thinking a lot about music, and I think a lot about music. I play music. I'm really into improvisational music and freeform jazz and things like that. So in the show, there's two basic bodies of work. There's these small sculptural wood pieces, and then there's works on paper. Both of them are made using very expressionistic painting marks, and then I take the kind of elements of these expressionistic painting marks and I cut them up and I reform them into these compositions. And then a lot of the compositions, it's very intuitive work. It has a lot to do with color and sort of pleasure, and a lot of the abstract images are allegorical for me. They're really allegories for things that are happening in my life that I don't necessarily expect the viewer to understand or relate to, but I'm hoping that the viewer will be able to kind of find their own narratives and pleasure in the compositions. And most of the titles, as I said, are either from this cassette tape or they're musical terms. There's a piece called Lyric, there's a piece called Duo, there's a piece called Duet, there's a piece, these two pieces over here, one's called Right or Wrong, and the other one's called I'll Be With You, and those are two titles from a country music song. I guess the other thing I want to talk about is, if we look over here at this piece. This is the first piece I made from this body of work, this one. This is the one that's on the invitation, and it's called Untitled In Your Face. And it's made up of a bunch of paintings that were cut up into strips and then reassembled together. So I'm really interested in sort of different painting techniques sitting beside each other and how they engage with each other. And I think about that as like relationships between people. Some of them are comfortable and some are awkward and some are like tense and some are relaxed. But this piece, it's a sculpture and it's also a painting, and that's another thing I've been interested in a long time, is this idea of, paintings and sculptures like hybrid practices. But with this piece, I took sort of all of these strips of paintings and I put them together, and then I just had this desire to like puncture the edges with something. So I was in Canadian Tire in Corner Brook, Newfoundland one day, and I saw these big kind of containers of golf tees, and they were all colorful and they're colorful wood. So I bought them and I was drilling holes in the sides of the piece, and I inserted these golf tees in the sides, and I really like them just as formal elements. But then I showed a picture of this piece to one of my friends, and he said it looks a lot like an African fetish object. And when he said that, I went and looked at African fetish objects, and I was astounded at how similar they were to that. And obviously I did study African art history, and I studied a lot of art history when I went to art school at Emily Carr, but I wasn't consciously referencing that. But after that had been identified, I went back and looked at African fetish objects, and I found out that with African fetish objects, they hammer nails in the side of them, and it's kind of like a way to sort of invoke like a wish or a dream. Like you kind of, it's like a meditative thing where you hammer these nails in the side and you kind of make wishes, right? And you kind of hope for something. And also with African fetish objects, the back of them are often carved out, and you can place things in the back, like an amulet. So what I then did is I came back to these pieces and I carved out a sort of an area in the back of each one of the wooden pieces that you could potentially place something in there, like a note or fingernail clippings or hair, or, you know, if there's something you want. So they're kind of like, there's kind of a spiritual quality to these, I guess. So then, yeah, and then the works on paper, you know, just very playful. I guess later on, I mean, after I made them, I realized they looked a lot like Matisse's cutout works I was making later in life. But I didn't really I mean, obviously I knew about that work, but didn't really think much about it until I finished the work, and then I went and looked more at Matisse, and I kind of wanted to understand why he was making that work at that time. And so yeah, I kind of, it's a sort of back and forth process. It's very intuitive. It's very much about color and life and energy and happiness and joy and, you know, relationships and music, and I think it's very, very joyous. For me, it really is evocative of how Victoria feels in the spring. It's very colorful. There's flowers, and yeah. So that's what the work's about.